part of the iM60, your full multi-parameter monitor. Here we have our ECG 5-lead or 3-lead, and then we have the atraumatic clips along with the sticky pads if you want to buy them separately. We have full pulse oximetry, non-invasive blood pressure with 5 different sizes of cuffs. We also have obviously the power supply. We have our battery unit which lasts up to about 4 hours when fully charged. Our dual temperature gauge which can be used as rectal or esophageal. We then have our water collection trap which takes any condensation, sampling line which connects to that, and then our ET adapter with our sampling port that connects onto the sampling line. Now I'll show you briefly how all of these are connected onto your unit. Now we're going to set the unit up by putting on the parameters. First one I'm going to do, but you can do it in any order, is with the ECG. Take the black lead to the black port and insert, make sure it's nice and flush. Then I'm going to do the pulse oximetry. This is connected to your blue port, and then we put that in, locks into place. If you've not already done it by now, take your lingual sensor and your adapter plug and connect them together, and then lock into place. Next thing I'm going to connect is the non-invasive blood pressure by taking this end of the tube and placing it into the metal nipple. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to connect the water trap for the capnography unit, simply by aligning it and pushing, and then you feel it click into place. Next thing I'm going to do is to take one end of the sampling line with the lure lock, push, twist until it locks into place. I'm then going to take my ET adapter. Again, I'm going to do exactly the same. Push, twist, and lock into place. And then I'm going to finally take my temperature probe, and you see that you have 2 ports here. Either one, it doesn't matter which one you use, and you can always take an additional probe if you want to do external or you want to measure esophageal and rectal at the same time. For this matter, I'm just going to put it into the top one. If we turn it over to the other side of the machine, we can then insert the battery by pushing down, opening the cap, lift up the arm, and we're going to insert the battery face up, and then we just lock it back into place. That is the connection of putting all the parameters into place. Now we're going to move on to the buttons on the front of the screen. This is obviously our power supply. This is going to be your best friend. This will be your alarm mute button. This one that we have here is to start the non-invasive blood pressure, symbolized by an arm with a cuff on the arm. This is the trend button. This allows you to bring up the trend graphs or trend tables at any point. This button is your pause in real time. So if we're using ECG or capnography, we can pause the screen and make a better analysis of what's on the screen. Here, this is for printing. If you wanted to at a later date, you can buy a printer which slots onto the side of the machine to record your ECG trace or any of the other parameters. And this button here will take you into the menu. This dial here was the one that allows you to go through any of your menu and selecting it if you don't like using the touchscreen feature. So now we're moving on to the touchscreen element of the screen, and we'll already use the mute button. The first thing that we've got here is admission. If you want to create a new patient profile, very, very simple. Just follow the process and you'll be able to save the parameters to review at a later date. Trend graph. This is where we can see our trends, and we can either do it through SpO2, we can do it through NIBP, respiration rate and so forth, and then we can just select the one we want to. Had the machine been used, we'd have our trend graphs there. Same for the trend table. Now we've got it in values instead of a graph, and again we would do exactly the same. Trend graphs we can do through intervals, and we can actually record these in real time as well. Alarm review, if we've had alarms going off, which we have, temperature 1 low, then we can review any of the alarms at a later date as well. We then use the black cursor key to move along. We've now got our ECG review, and if we've been using the ECG, we can do event or we can do time, and then we can scroll up and down through any of the reviews that we want to look at. We're currently in standard screen at the moment, but if we want to, we can turn it into a trend screen. So now our waveforms have shortened, but in real time we've got all of our trends. If we wanted to, we can put all of this into a large screen, but what I'm going to do is just put it back into standard for the moment. Another very nice function on this unit is our vital. This vital will give us all of our values in large font for everybody to see at any time. But now again, just for this, we're going to go back into our standard form. We're now going to go through into our next page. Module switch is a very nice one for people that are a little bit concerned about using a full multi-parameter for the first time. If required, we can turn as many or as few of these off. So for this example, I'm going to turn everything off apart from the SpO2, which most people are well aware of, and we'll close it, software changes it, and all we've got now left is our SpO2. And again, go back into our module, we're going to do this select all, and we're going to put them all back on again. But as I say, you can have as many or as few modules on at any time. Key volume, that's what it says on the label. And then we've got brightness. Standby, we can just put the machine into standby mode. And if you wanted to have invasive blood pressure, we would use this one here to have a look at setting up the parameters on the IBP. We then have finally alarm setup. However, I would recommend that we just use these parameters to set up our alarm, as it's much quicker. Beat volume, when we're using our pulse ox, we can just turn it down or we can turn it up. And finally, night mode, just dims the screen, and then we can put it back into daytime mode. Now we're going to use the menu by using the dial. So we're going to push the menu button, which brings up our menu, and then we can select any of these parameters simply by turning the dial left or right. If we want to go into patient setup, we highlight, push the button, turn the button to new patient, and then we can either create a new patient or not. We'll now go out of this by highlighting the X. We can now go into our display setup. We can have a standard screen, again by selecting, push the button, and then go into our standard tread screen or large font, or go into our vitals, or leave it in standard and go out. It's exactly the same as we've been through on the touch screen. The only difference is that we use this to start the menu function, and then we turn the dial, highlight and push to bring up one of the parameters. Now we're just going to finish up by looking at all the different parameters that we have on the side and how to adjust them. You can always adjust them by going into the menu. However, I'd recommend that you use them by just touching and bringing up the whole menu of that particular parameter, as this is a much faster way of doing it and a much more simple way of doing it. So I've currently brought up an ECG. The first thing it's asking for is lead type 3 leads. Under general anaesthetic, 3 leads would be the way to go. However, if you know you've got a cardiac issue, you can then change it over to a 5 lead and turn it into a full diagnostic, which if you get any issues under surgery, you'll get the warnings at the top of the screen, as we have here, T1 low, temperature 1 low, and so forth. Again, I'm going to put it back into 3 lead. Display currently is in normal. If we put it into a 5 lead, we can turn the whole screen either into a large ECG trace or half the screen. You can only do that when you're using a 5 lead. Filter, it's always recommended middle, but if you want to increase or reduce the filter, depending on the heart output, you can change into a strong or a weaker output. Smart lead is off because we're only using 3 lead. You can do calculation leads 2, 1 or 3. Pace is on, but if you wanted to turn the pace off, again you can do that. Beat source, we have heart rate, ECG, or pulse rate from the SpO2 if we're not using ECG, or we can just leave it as auto and it'll take the strongest one, which tends to be the ECG. Alarm setup, again this is a very simple way of just setting up your alarms. At the moment we're on heart rate, so we can select 200. So we're going to have a cat. We know it's going to be about 300. We'll just keep our finger on it and we go up to 250, 260, wherever we want to go. And then we might be concerned of the pulse rate being less than 60. So we just use the down arrow. And by pressing the X button, this will automatically save those parameters. Record at the moment we're off, but if we wanted to review them at a later date, we can just turn it on. And then if we want to go back, as I say, we can record them. Levels of the pitch at the moment is on medium or high. We'll just leave it on to medium. And by going out, just by pressing the X button. The same goes for the respirate. Here we have a respiration lead is lead 2. Apnea alarm set on 20 seconds. If we want to adjust the apnea alarm, again we can bring up all the values. And by setting up the alarm by alarm setup, again exactly the same formula as the previous one. Pulse rate comes from your SpO2. Alarm source is automatic. Beat source is automatic. If we want to change them onto, again, heart rate, we can do it that way. And again, we go out to the volume. So SpO2, pitch tone is on, sensitivity is low. If you're doing dentals on an animal, you might find that turning up the sensitivity while having the lingual sensor on an ear, put it onto high, and majority of the time you'll be able to find that you can get the pulse oximetry readings using it this way. However, when finished in a high sensitivity, put it back onto low to prolong the life of the lingual sensor. Again, we have our alarm setup. If we now go into temperature, basically we can turn it to unit of centigrade or Fahrenheit, again just by dropping down the box. Alarm setup, again exactly the same. End tidal, capnography. To activate the capnography part of the software, we do need to go into the CO2 setup. We take it from work mode, we change from standby into measure. Our capnography is now working. Again, we can change the apnea alarm directly from here and recommended of 20 seconds. The unit is measured in as millimoles of mercury at the moment. We can now go into our alarm setup. Again, exactly the same, fraction inspired, end tidal, can all be done through here. Zero calibration, I will show you how to do this at a later time. We now go into our NIBP. So again, we're measuring in millimoles of mercury. Measure mode is manual at the moment. If we turn it into auto, we can then set the time at a predetermined stage that the NIBP will automatically work for you. Inflation mode, manual, just leave it into the manual mode. Cuff type, you have 3 different types of cuff sizes. You have 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. 1 and 2 is actually classed as small, 3 is middle, and big is 4 or 5. Depending on which cuff you're using, you should set the software to the size of the cuff that you're using. Review is on. Alarm setup, we've been through on all the other parameters exactly the same. Continuous, it will just keep running, it'll finish and then start another one. If you want to go back at any point just to reset all the parameters to what they were, just hit the default button. Thank you very much, and if you have any questions, please feel free to contact us at any time.